The church was filled with white roses, my favorite, their sweet fragrance mingling with the nervous anticipation that had settled in my chest like a flock of restless birds. I had watched the clock on the wall tick past 11:15, then 11:30, and now the hands were crawling toward noon. Marcus Davenport was half an hour late to our wedding. I tried calling him over and over, 27 times to be exact. Each call went straight to voicemail after the first ring, as if he kept rejecting me before the phone could even connect. The wedding planner kept bringing me glasses of water, her face a careful mask of professional calm, but I could see the panic flickering in her eyes like a candle in a storm. Then it happened. All at once, every phone in the sanctuary began to chime, buzz, and ring. The sound was like a deranged symphony, a technological catastrophe that made every guest reach for their pocket or purse. Confusion rippled through the crowd like wind across a wheat field. My maid of honor, Sophia, stared at her screen with an expression I couldn't read. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the mounting chaos. "You need to see this." I took her phone with trembling fingers. The screen displayed a trending topic that made my blood run cold. Davenport heir jumps into river for first love on wedding day. Below it, a cascade of other headlines. Old flame returns from Paris. Is the bride about to be left at the altar? And the most devastating of all, Davenport wedding postponed indefinitely. I tapped on the video. The man in the custom-made briny wedding suit was unmistakably Marcus. He stood on the bridge pier, his back to the camera, but I knew the breadth of those shoulders, the way he held himself with that arrogant posture that had both infuriated and captivated me for years. His voice, when it came through the tinny speakers, trembled with an emotion I had never heard from him. "Juliet, I'm not getting married. Please calm down." The woman facing him, sobbing like a heartbroken child, was Juliet Moreau, Marcus's first love from their university days in Lyon. She was delicate, porcelain pretty, the kind of fragile beauty that made men want to protect her. She wore a thin white cotton dress that seemed entirely unsuitable for December, and she stood perilously close to the edge of the bridge. "You're lying, Marcus." Her voice cracked with theatrical anguish. "You're still wearing the engagement ring. I'm not a child anymore, you can't fool me." I watched, frozen, as Marcus pulled the ring from his finger, the ring we had chosen together at Tiffany's, a 7-carat cushion-cut diamond that had cost nearly $1 million, and hurled it into the dark water below. It caught the weak winter sunlight for just a moment before vanishing, like a star falling to earth. "I'm not lying, Juliet." His voice was so tender, so patient, so utterly unlike the cold, distant man I knew. "Now please, it's freezing. Put on my jacket." But Juliet, still playing her role, stepped backward instead of forward, her pout perfectly crafted for the camera phones that had surely been summoned by some carefully placed tip. "I don't want to wear the jacket you were going to marry another woman in." She lost her balance. Marcus lunged forward without hesitation, catching her just as she tipped over the railing. They fell together, a tangle of wedding suit and white cotton, disappearing into the river below. I felt the world tilt. Sophia caught my elbow, steadying me, but I barely noticed. On the video, firefighters were already pulling them both from the water. The river was barely 12 feet deep at that spot, more of an overgrown creek than a true river. Juliet curled in Marcus's arms, shivering dramatically, her performance reaching its climax. "Marcus, I was so scared. If you hadn't been here today, I would have died." "Don't be scared. I'm here." He held her like something precious, something irreplaceable. I had never seen him hold anyone like that. He certainly had never held me that way. "Will your fiancé be angry?" Waiting at the altar. Juliet's voice was small, guilty, perfect. Marcus's response cut through me like a blade. "You mean Eleanor?" His dismissive tone needed no visual accompaniment. "Don't worry. As long as she can marry me, she'll put up with anything." The video ended. I stood in my Vera Wang gown, surrounded by 300 guests who had all just watched my fiancé tell the world, and me, that my love meant so little that I would accept any humiliation for the privilege of bearing his name. The sanctuary erupted. "So much for true love," someone muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Turns out the bride was just marrying into the Davenport family for the money. No wonder Marcus treated her so coldly. Jumping into a river for another woman on his wedding day. Another voice dripping with contempt. That's barely deeper than a swimming pool. She wouldn't have died even if he hadn't jumped. But he still threw himself in after her. Modern-day rich boy rescues his damsel. Classic. They weren't just laughing at the Davenports. They were laughing at me. Marcus's mother, Victoria Davenport, materialized at my side, her face flushed with rage. Her Balenciaga suit suddenly seemed less elegant, more like armor she was failing to maintain. This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to find him myself. This wedding is happening today, Eleanor. I won't allow. I stopped her with a hand on her arm. Victoria, don't. My voice surprised me, calm, measured, utterly composed. With Marcus's personality, no one can talk him out of anything right now. Not even you. I turned to face the guests. 300 faces stared back at me, some pitying, some smug, all hungry for more drama. I smiled, and I have no idea how I managed it. Everyone, please. My voice carried across the sanctuary. Marcus just messaged me. He'll be at the hospital for a few days. The wedding will be postponed, but everything for today's reception was carefully prepared, so please enjoy yourselves. All gifts will be returned in full, of course. Drinks and party favors are on me. Silence. Then, slowly, murmurs of something like respect. I signaled to the wedding coordinator, who had the presence of mind to start the dinner service. People were already starving. The ceremony had been scheduled for 11, and it was now past noon. The banquet was extraordinary, as Victoria Davenport had insisted it must be beluga caviar, Kobe beef, Dom Perignon flowing like water. The party favors, custom Baccarat crystal, were worth more than most people's monthly salaries. The gossip didn't stop, but its tone shifted. The laughter at my expense transformed into something closer to sympathy. They didn't know they were wasting their pity. I hadn't married Marcus Davenport for his money. It was the Davenport family that needed mine. Victoria Davenport had noticed my feelings for Marcus long before he ever did. Mothers see everything, especially mothers who are fighting to save their family's legacy. She approached my parents at a charity gala 6 months before the wedding, her timing as impeccable as her couture. The Davenport's patriarch Harold Davenport had passed away 18 months earlier, and the empire he'd built was crumbling faster than anyone outside the family knew. Victoria needed a miracle. She needed capital, and she needed it quietly. My family, the Whitmores, had that capital. My father, Thomas Whitmore, had built a logistics empire from nothing, surviving bankruptcy, betrayal, and 100 other obstacles that would have destroyed lesser men. My mother had nearly lost her mind during those dark years, but we had survived. We had thrived. And I had never forgotten the boy who once stood between me and destruction. Victoria spun the proposal carefully, as was her way. She suggested that perhaps the Whitmores might need investment, might benefit from an alliance with the prestigious Davenport name. She made it seem as though she was doing us a favor. I agreed immediately. My parents, who knew my heart better than anyone, asked only one question: "Are you sure, Eleanor?" I was sure. I had been sure since I was 15 years old. What Victoria didn't know, what she could never know, was that her ruthless methods to remove Juliette Moreau from Marcus's life were entirely unnecessary. All she'd had to do was plant a few whispers through carefully chosen channels, suggesting the Davenport Group was on the brink of bankruptcy. Juliette, ever practical beneath her theatrical exterior, had manufactured a reason to study abroad and vanished from Marcus's life within weeks. Marcus never knew. He believed she had simply fallen out of love with him, or perhaps never loved him at all. He certainly never suspected his mother's hand in her departure. And me? I became the convenient target for all his bitterness. You think that just because you pleased my mother and bought your way into the Davenport family, I'll fall in love with you? The memory surfaced unbidden. Marcus in a dimly lit bar downtown, a cigarette burning between his fingers, his beautiful face twisted with contempt. I had come to deliver a change of clothes after he'd spent the night at some hotel with a woman whose name I never learned. Stop dreaming, Eleanor. You're nothing but a pathetic social climber who threw herself at me for our family's money. He wasn't wrong from his perspective. From the moment I agreed to the alliance, I had willingly begun groveling at his feet. I brought him clothes when he stayed out all night. I made excuses for his absences. I absorbed his cruelty like a sponge, always believing that beneath the ice the boy I remembered was still there. Sometimes he would stare at me with something almost like confusion. Eleanor, do you not have any self-respect? Is money from the Davenport family really that important to you? He didn't know. He couldn't know. Back when my family was falling apart, when debt collectors hounded us and my father nearly threw himself in front of a train, I was forced to attend an elite school on scholarship. The wealthy children there made my life a living hell. They cornered me in hallways, mocked my second-hand clothes, and one winter day, they forced me to my knees on the frozen ground outside the gymnasium. Marcus Davenport had walked past, seen what was happening, and stopped. Why bully a girl? His voice had been bored, almost disinterested. If you've got guts, try bullying me. Everyone knew he was the most dangerous of the Davenport heirs, cold, powerful, untouchable. The bullies scattered like leaves before wind. He never spoke to me. He never acknowledged me again. But after that day, no one laid a hand on me. They isolated me instead, but isolation was infinitely preferable to the bruises and humiliation I'd endured before. For 3 years, I survived high school because Marcus Davenport existed. He never knew. He never once looked my way. But whenever someone approached me with malicious intent, he would somehow inexplicably appear in the vicinity. A single sharp glance from those ice-blue eyes and they would retreat. He was my silent guardian, my invisible shield. And I loved him with the desperate, consuming love that only a lonely teenager can feel. So when Victoria Davenport came to us, when my parents said they wouldn't object if I was willing, I nodded without hesitation. I'm willing, I said. But I have one condition. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. Name it. Marcus must eventually fall in love with me. Truly love me. Not pretend. Not perform. Actually love me. She smiled then, a knowing smile that made me wonder how much she understood. That, my dear, is between you and my son. I can't control his heart. Then I'll win it myself. The agreement was simple. The Whitmore family would provide capital to stabilize the Davenport Group. In return, I would receive a corresponding percentage of company shares. Victoria, to her credit, was a straightforward businesswoman. We reached consensus quickly, and within months the financial holes began to fill. Victoria's urgency to move the wedding forward became almost palpable. Eleanor, you and Marcus are already engaged. So what if he doesn't love you yet? The wedding still needs to happen. I just smiled. I can wait, Victoria. I've waited this long. I had confidence because I could see the changes in Marcus. He still wore that emotionless mask, but he no longer disappeared to hotels with random women. He came home after work and stayed in his study all evening. The housekeeper, Maria, eventually revealed the secret with delighted mischief. There's a thick stack of sketches hidden in Mr. Davenport's drawer, she told me, gesturing with her fingers. This thick. And they are all of you, Miss Eleanor. I never snooped. I didn't need to. I had my own evidence. Sometimes when I fell asleep reading on the couch, I would wake to find a blanket tucked around me. Sometimes I would open my eyes just enough to see Marcus watching me from across the room, his expression unguarded, almost tender. He would always sigh before walking away, and by morning his mask would be firmly back in place. But breakfast told the truth. The boiled eggs were always perfectly peeled. The oatmeal always had 2 red dates at the bottom. Maria would grin and say, Mr. Davenport wakes up early to make all of it and he still tries to hide it. Why hide being good to his wife? All of us are hoping you two marry soon. On my birthday, Marcus proposed. His face was as stone cold as ever, as if someone held a knife to his throat. Miss Whitmore, I'm proposing. Happy now? Victoria scolded him. What kind of proposal is that? Do it properly. But I knew he had secretly measured my ring finger while I slept, using a ribbon. I knew he had hidden the ring in a handmade Italian suit the moment it arrived. I had even overheard him telling Maria, "No one touches this blue suit. Understand?" Every night after I fell asleep, he would take the ring and leave the room. I wasn't really asleep. I would tiptoe barefoot to the door and peek through the crack. On the terrace, under the winter moonlight, Marcus Davenport knelt alone and practiced his proposal to an empty chair. "Eleanor, will you marry me?" His ears turned red. He looked like a boy deeply, helplessly in love. My heart soared every time. "I will," I whispered to myself. "I will, Marcus." On the official proposal day, after I accepted the ring, he leaned close and murmured, "Go home and wait for me." I didn't understand, but I went. When he closed the door behind him, his cold face finally melted, and I understood what it meant for an iceberg to erupt like a volcano. "I'm yours now," he whispered against my skin. Satisfied. From then on, through countless nights, I believed our love had transcended everything. I believed we had arrived at a future where we truly belonged to each other. I was wrong. I found Marcus at the hospital 3 hours after the wedding was supposed to begin. His eyes were tired when he saw me, dark circles shadowing them like bruises. There was a small cut on his forehead, probably from the fall. "I'm fine," he said immediately, the words rushing out as if he needed to reassure me. I moved past his shoulder and looked at the hospital bed behind him. Juliette Moreau lay there, pale and ethereal in her thin cotton dress, now replaced by a hospital gown. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like a silk fan. When she heard Marcus's voice, she opened her eyes and asked, with perfect innocence, "Marcus, who's that?" "Eleanor Whitmore," he said. Just that. No explanation, no context. As if I were a stranger. I studied her carefully. This woman had chosen my wedding day to stage her dramatic return. She had chosen the exact route our wedding convoy would take. She had timed everything perfectly for maximum exposure, maximum humiliation. And now she pretended not to know me. "Juliet doesn't really use the internet," Marcus explained, his voice carrying that same patient tone I'd heard in the video. "Her life is pretty simple. She probably hasn't seen anything yet." I smiled, a thin, cold expression I barely recognized as my own. "Oh, is that so?" I pointed to the phone beside her bed, its screen still glowing with activity. "It seems this young lady knows how to get online after all. She just might not be great at reading." I leaned in and read aloud, word for word, "Davenport heir jumps into river for first love. Whitmore heiress Eleanor visits the hospital." Marcus turned to look at Juliet, something like confusion flickering across his features. She quickly shut off the phone screen, her lower lip trembling in that practiced way. I just saw it right before Eleanor walked in. Her voice was small, aggrieved, perfect. "Please don't blame Marcus, Eleanor. I was the one who threw a tantrum and made a scene. If you're going to scold anyone, scold me." She looked up at me, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Don't cry," I said calmly. "Today you cried. You made a scene. You jumped off a bridge. Fortunately, no one died. If someone does die one day, you'll still have time to cry about it then." Juliet's tears vanished as if someone had turned off a faucet. Marcus stepped forward, his hand reaching toward me. "Eleanor, I know I ruined the wedding. But I couldn't just stand there and watch her die. As for the wedding, once she recovers, we can reschedule. We'll do it properly." I nodded slowly. "Okay. For now, just rest well. We can talk about the wedding later." I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window, falling directly onto Juliet's hand. On her finger, glittering like captured starlight, was a pink diamond ring, 7 carats, cushion cut, one of a kind from a master jeweler in Milan. My ring. The one Marcus had supposedly thrown into the river. I froze. The world narrowed to that single point of light, that impossible, devastating sight. Nausea rose in my throat like bile. Marcus followed my gaze. I heard his sharp intake of breath, then the explosion of his voice. "Juliet, what are you doing?" He turned to me, words tumbling out in a desperate flood, more words than I had heard him speak in all our time together. "Eleanor, please don't misunderstand. She's just childish. When she found out I didn't actually throw the ring away, she said she wanted to play with it for a bit. I didn't want her causing a scene at the hospital, so I let her have it temporarily. She'll give it back when she's tired of it." I listened to this torrent of explanation with something approaching wonder. I had longed for Marcus to explain himself. When he came home late, I wished he would tell me why, just to show he cared. When he made me breakfast or tucked me in at night, I hoped he would say something sweet, something loving. Today, I finally realized he was capable of words. He simply hadn't wanted to use them with me. Juliet threatened to jump and he spoke volumes, coaxing her down. Juliet wanted a ring and he handed over our engagement symbol without a second thought. And now, in front of his bride, he felt the need to explain why another woman wore it. "She'll give it back when she's bored," he repeated. "Don't take it personally. It's like arguing with a child." Juliet Moreau is 28 years old. Marcus was calling her a child. He looked at me with pleading eyes, that sharp gaze softening into desperate appeal. He wanted me to be some benevolent priest, placing my hand on his head and declaring all forgiven. I am not that kind of deity. And Marcus Davenport is not that kind of believer. Still, he waited. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "you're not mad at me, are you?" I laughed. It was a soft, breezy sound, utterly devoid of warmth. "You should focus on recovering. The rest can wait until after you're discharged." I turned and walked away, pulling the engagement ring from my finger as I went. Without breaking stride, I dropped it into a trash can by the elevator. Maria, who had followed me to the hospital, fished it out silently and slipped it into her pocket. When our car passed the villa Marcus and I had shared, I didn't ask the driver to stop. We continued to my family home, the Whitmore estate, where my parents waited with faces full of concern and love. Once inside, Maria asked what I wanted to do with the ring. I glanced at our newly adopted rescue dog, a scruffy mixed-breed Wid named Oscar, and casually looped the ring around his collar. One ring on a dog's neck. One ring being toyed within Juliet Moreau's hand. A perfect match. Looking at Oscar's trusting brown eyes, I immediately felt guilty. Oscar deserved better than to be part of this symbolism. He would never fall for someone who wore thin cotton dresses in December. I called Victoria Davenport that evening. "Auntie Victoria," I said gently, cutting off her attempts to plead her son's case, "I agreed to this marriage alliance freely. Now that the Davenport group has recovered 90% at least, there's no need for you to feel guilty. Even though Marcus and I never officially married, the Whitmore family still holds significant Davenport stock. We've all profited together." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. But perhaps this is how fate intended it. I was never meant to be part of your family. I returned every piece of jewelry she had given me, each piece catalogued and packed with care. "I know you came to apologize for Marcus. But it's all in the past now. I truly loved him once and now I truly don't. I have no regrets about knowing him." Victoria sighed deeply. She saw my resolve and instructed her driver to take back the jewelry without further argument. "Oh, and there's no need to tell Marcus about the engagement ending," I added. "I'd prefer not to be disturbed by him for now. I need time alone." I gave her one final reminder, soft words with a hard edge, "Unless you want the Davenport group to lose Whitmore financial support." Victoria understood perfectly. For the sake of her company, she agreed. Just like that, the close relationship between our families became distant and formal. Maria resigned and returned to her hometown, though she helped find a replacement housekeeper for the villa first. That night, I left the country. Only my parents knew where I was going. Everyone else, including Marcus Davenport, believed I had gone on an extended business trip. Marcus was discharged from the hospital 3 days after the wedding that never happened. He returned to the villa expecting to find me there, probably asleep on the couch with a book, or perhaps waiting with patient forgiveness like I always had before. Instead, he found a new housekeeper. "Where's Maria?" he asked immediately. "She had a family emergency back home, sir," the new housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, explained. Miss Whitmore mentioned she might be away on a business trip. Marcus glanced around the villa. The bedroom was empty. My side of the closet still held my clothes. He would later count them obsessively, realizing I hadn't taken anything, but I wasn't there. For the first time, the villa felt truly empty. The doctors had recommended Marcus stay another 2 days for observation, concerned about possible concussion. But he had felt an inexplicable urgency to leave, a nagging sense that something was wrong. Deep down, he had known I would be angry. He planned to take the ring back from Juliet immediately. He had never intended to give it to her permanently. When he threw it off the bridge, he had actually thrown something else from his pocket, creating an illusion to calm her. To him, Juliet was like a child who could be managed with simple tricks. He had once loved her for that theatrical quality, that dramatic flair that made her so different from the calculated world of Davenport expectations. At school, everyone feared his cold authority, everyone except Juliet. Her childish antics had fascinated him. But that was before me. Now, lying in the hospital bed, he had replayed every moment of the past 2 years. He remembered how I would be reading on the couch when he came home, how he would sketch me from his study window, capturing every furrowed brow, every bitten lip, every smile of frustration or joy. He remembered the silk nightgown I left on the bed, and how he would sometimes hold it just to feel closer to me. He remembered the proposal practice on the terrace, the way his ears burned even though no one was watching. He remembered loving me. He just hadn't known how to say it. When Marcus finally got home, he called me immediately. No answer. He called again. And again. He sent a text, then another. Finally, he recorded a voice message, the first he had ever sent anyone, clearing his throat several times before whispering, "Baby, I miss you." He fell asleep clutching my nightgown, waiting for a reply that never came. The next morning he woke early, earlier than he ever had when I was there. Out of habit, he went to the kitchen to heat milk and prepare oatmeal. Mrs. Chen tried to take over, but he gently refused. "I always make Eleanor's hot milk," he said softly, glancing toward the empty couch. Normally around this time she'd be sitting there, reading or writing in her journal. "I make her oatmeal too." Mrs. Chen watched his tall figure reach for the oats. "But Miss Eleanor isn't here today." His hand froze midair. He had been so lost in the ritual and the memory of me that he had forgotten I was gone. He put down the milk and walked out of the kitchen. The villa felt hollow. But the real emptiness wasn't in the house, it was inside him where I used to live. The doorbell rang. Before Mrs. Chen could move, Marcus was already striding toward the door, hope blazing across his features. "She's back," he thought. "Eleanor must be home." He opened the door to find Juliet Moreau. She saw the disappointment on his face immediately. "What's with the look? Not happy to see me?" "I came to apologize to Eleanor. I feel terrible about interrupting your wedding." Marcus didn't invite her in. "Is it because your fiancé doesn't want to see me?" Juliet pressed, refusing to give up. She believed his rescue meant something, that there was still a place for her in his heart. "Juliet," Marcus said wearily, "I've always thought of you as a little sister." He had begun to regret saving her. He should have been at his wedding. But when she sent that message threatening suicide, he couldn't ignore it. A life was a life. He thought I would understand. I had always been so patient, so forgiving, no matter how much he hurt me. He forgot that patience has limits. Forgiveness requires something to forgive. Just as Marcus tried to close the door, Juliet swayed dramatically and collapsed toward him. Instinctively, he caught her. "I'm not feeling well," she murmured. "I just want to sit for a bit." Once inside, she moved toward the couch, my couch, the one where I read and slept and dreamed. Marcus grabbed her arm sharply. That's not your place. He pulled out a guest chair instead. You can sit here and rest. Juliet pouted. I just wanted to lie down. Mrs. Chen, who clearly had no patience for dramatic women, brought her green tea and placed it before her with barely concealed contempt. The floor's clean. I just mopped it. Lying on the floor of Mr. Davenport and Miss Whitmore's villa might suit you best. While Juliet glared, Marcus's attention had fixed on something else, a small suitcase she had brought. Something about it tugged at his memory. Suddenly, he rushed into the bedroom and flung open the closet. His clothes filled most of the walk-in wardrobe. He had never been one for shopping, preferring to donate money to causes rather than buy things for himself. My section was small but perfectly organized. He began counting. 1, 2, 3, slowly, methodically, hoping desperately to find fewer items than usual, proof that I had packed, that I really was on a trip. He counted from left to right, then right to left, then left to right again. Nothing was missing. Not a single piece. By the third count, his hands were trembling. Sir, what are you looking for? Mrs. Chen asked gently. I can help. Marcus didn't answer. He just kept counting obsessively, as if the numbers might change if he looked hard enough. Juliet appeared in the doorway. Marcus, do you need help? The moment she lifted her foot to enter, his voice cut through the air like ice. Stop right there. She had never heard him speak so harshly. She forced a laugh anyway. Marcus, I'm only trying to help. I said get out. He grabbed a crystal vase from the dresser and held it toward the door. It struck her square in the face and blood began to pour instantly. For the first time, her pain looked genuine. Why are you yelling at me? I was just trying to help. She looked up at him, expecting the usual complicated guilt, maybe even concern. Instead, she found a man colder than she had ever seen him, a predator's gaze flat and deadly. I said get out. There was no drama in his voice, no emphasis. Just a quiet, grinding rage that made Juliet flee without another word. Marcus didn't remember her leaving. He only knew that he had lost. He had to face what he didn't want to admit. I wasn't on a business trip. I had never left for work. I hadn't taken anything, not clothes, not toiletries, not even a phone charger. He grabbed his coat and rushed out the door. Marcus arrived at the Whitmore estate like a man possessed. He had prepared speeches in his head, apologies, promises. He would beg if necessary, let them punish him, do whatever it took. Then he saw Oscar. The family dog, a scruffy rescue with soulful brown eyes, wore something glittering around his neck. Our engagement ring. Marcus nearly collapsed. He bent down with shaking hands and removed the ring from the dog's collar, swallowing the humiliation like poison. Then he forced himself to stand tall and walk through the gates. My father, Thomas Whitmore, greeted him with calm distance. You're here. Come in, sit down. My mother, Catherine, maintained the graceful poise of a refined matriarch, but her eyes held no warmth. Marcus looked at these two people he had once imagined calling Mom and Dad. Now all he could manage was a strained Uncle Thomas, Aunt Catherine. Could I please see Eleanor? Just once. My father took a sip of tea. Eleanor's gone abroad. She asked us not to disturb her for the time being. Not even family. Marcus's knuckles went white. Uncle Thomas, Aunt Catherine, I know I ruined the wedding. I failed Eleanor. But someone's life was at stake. I didn't want anyone to die on our wedding day. My mother stood abruptly. You didn't want a death? Did you ever consider the consequences of holding another woman in your arms and jumping into a river on the day of your marriage to my daughter? My father, more measured, kept his tone even. There were two possible outcomes, Marcus. 1, the Davenport and Whitmore families collapse together. 2, both families become a laughingstock on the internet. That's what happened. But my mother didn't hold back. Her voice trembled with suppressed fury. Mr. Davenport, the only reason we're even talking to you today is because Eleanor once had feelings for you. You jumped into a river to save another woman on your wedding day. Have you ever stopped to think about how Eleanor felt? She loved you, cared for you deeply, and what did you do? You put another woman's life ahead of hers on your wedding day, and it's not even like you were the only one who could have saved that girl. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Do you know why strangers assumed you'd abandon Eleanor? Because even they could see there were 4 or 5 firefighters right next to that girl. She would have been fine. But no, you had to play hero. If you wanted to act out some fantasy of saving the damsel in distress, fine, but don't drag my daughter into it. Marcus began to panic. He scrambled for anything that might redeem him, and as always, his mind turned to money and shares. After all, wasn't that why Eleanor had insisted on marrying him? For the Davenport Group's capital? Uncle Thomas, Aunt Catherine, I was wrong. I'll transfer shares of the Davenport Group to Eleanor. As much as she wants. He caught the look of disbelief in my father's eyes. She didn't tell you, did she? Marcus froze. Well then. My father set down his teacup. Eleanor only asked her future mother-in-law not to tell you about the engagement ending. I didn't expect Victoria to actually keep her word. He looked at Marcus with undisguised contempt. Let me tell you something, young man. It was your mother who came to us begging for this marriage. After your father passed, the Davenport Group's financial situation became critical. Your mother knew Eleanor had feelings for you, so she came in person, hoping a marriage alliance could bring in capital and save your company. Marcus stared, uncomprehending. Eleanor agreed, my father continued. She told us she loved you. She remembered how you stood up for her in high school when she was being bullied. We didn't ask for more than that. We let her make her own choice. She wanted to marry you. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And now you talk about giving her shares? Let me tell you something, Marcus. Eleanor already owns more shares of the Davenport Group than you do. She's the largest stakeholder. So tell me, how much are you planning to give to your majority shareholder? The words struck like physical blows. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. If my father could have stepped on his already shattered pride, he would have. He remembered the nights before the wedding when I had cried silently, while Marcus was out partying, demanding I deliver clothes to hotel rooms. I had never spoken ill of him, never complained. And when the wedding approached, I had told my father, Dad, I know Marcus has changed. I'm sure he really loves me. I'm marrying for love. My father had watched me go from silent suffering to glowing joy. He had been happy for me. Then the wedding day destroyed everything. He didn't tell Marcus any of this. He simply watched the young man's face crumble as the truth sank in. Marcus didn't remember driving home. He sat in the dark villa, staring at the empty couch, replaying every moment of the past 2 years. I had never married him for money. From the very beginning, it had always been about love. And he had trampled all over it. He grabbed a bottle of liquor and smashed it against his own head. Blood streamed down his face, but he felt nothing. He sat there like a host, like a broken doll tossed in a landfill, unwanted, forgotten. Day turned to night. Night turned to day. The texts he sent remained unanswered. Finally, he made a decision. He would go to the ends of the earth if necessary. He would find me no matter where I was. But he didn't spiral into ruin. Instead, he poured himself into running the company. Partly because he knew I still held shares, as long as the company thrived, he felt connected to me by a faint thread. And partly because he needed to be better, stronger, for the day we would meet again. From the moment I vanished, Marcus never stopped looking. It became his only mission outside of work. 6 months passed. He exhausted every resource, spent more than anyone could imagine. And finally, he got a lead. He booked a flight immediately, 16 hours in the air, and arrived at the headquarters of a multinational corporation where I had built a new company from scratch. And there I was, walking out the front doors. I saw him before he saw me. Marcus Davenport, standing outside my company's headquarters like a ghost from another life. He looked the same, tall, handsome, carrying that poised elegance that had always made people stare. But there was something different too, something haunted in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I had just lit a small firework, a silly tradition my colleagues had started for celebrating successful project launches, when I noticed him. And then, because the universe has a cruel sense of humor, my fiancé walked out of the building behind me. "Eleanor," he called, and I turned smiling and ran into his arms. Marcus saw me move. He saw me open my arms and run, and for one devastating moment he thought I was running to him. He lit up, opening his arms wide, only to watch me leap like a joyful bird into another man's embrace. He froze where he stood. Wrapped in my fiancé's arms, I caught a glimpse of that familiar figure in my peripheral vision. Marcus, arms still outstretched, face frozen in shock. Our eyes met. My fiancé followed my gaze. "Who's that?" "Oh." I smiled politely, the way I would at any stranger. "Just someone I used to know." I looped my arm through my fiancé's and we began to walk. As we passed Marcus, I offered a courteous nod. "It's been a while." He couldn't speak. He stood there, aching so deeply he wanted to tear himself apart. "Eleanor." His voice cracked. "Can we talk?" My fiancé glanced at him, then at me. I nodded. "Sure. Let's talk here." Marcus, once the proud heir of the Davenport family, looked at the man beside me, the man holding the hand that once belonged to him. But anger would get him nowhere, so he lowered himself. "Eleanor." His voice was soft, pleading. "Please don't leave me. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have left you on our wedding day to save Juliet. But I love you. We had so many beautiful moments. You loved me once. I know you did." He reached for my hand and then he saw it. The ring on my finger. Brilliant, clear, glinting more sharply than sunlight on desert sand. An engagement ring. Not his. Marcus staggered, catching himself against a car door. I spoke gently. "Saving someone isn't wrong, Marcus. That was your choice. But walking away from you is mine, and that's not wrong either." I met his eyes without flinching. "I don't regret loving you. Back then you were worth it. But I don't regret leaving you either, because the person you became, I no longer wanted to love." I touched my ring and smiled. "I'm engaged now. Tonight we're celebrating with friends. I won't keep you. Oh, and by the way, my fiancé isn't some stand-in love interest. It's just a coincidence that his name is similar to yours. Goodbye, Marcus." I gave him a courteous smile, the same I would give any stranger, and walked away. Behind me, a group of our friends burst from the building, laughing and shouting. Champagne bottles popped. Balloons soared into the air. The entire street erupted with joy and celebration. Passers-by clapped and cheered, wishing us happiness. Marcus leaned against the car and slid to the ground on that foreign street. He fell ill that night and couldn't get back up. When he was finally discharged from the hospital weeks later, he turned on his phone to find the world had moved on without him. Through the Davenport Group's press releases, through congratulatory messages from every industry and outlet, he saw it, my wedding photo. I was smiling so brightly, so joyfully. None of it had anything to do with him anymore. Marcus put his phone in his pocket and rubbed the bruised spot where the foreneedle had left its mark. His arm was pale and tender from weeks of infusion. He walked aimlessly into the biting wind. Then he heard someone shouting in rapid French, "Any reculez pas. C'est dangereux." Only then did Marcus realize he was standing on the edge of a bridge. He blinked. In the distance, the ocean blurred into the gray sky. He remembered something. Hadn't he once stood on a bridge before? On a wedding day? But who had he been trying to save? He couldn't quite recall. All he remembered was that the bridge back then wasn't even a tenth as high as this one, and the water wasn't nearly as deep. He had fallen because that girl had pulled him down with her. He wanted to tell me, Eleanor, that he hadn't fallen off that bridge holding Juliet Moreau in his arms. He had jumped to catch her, yes, but he hadn't held her. She had clung to him. But what did it matter now? He opened his arms as the sea breeze swept in. Just as he lifted his left foot, preparing to close his eyes, several strong hands pulled him back. Firefighters. Bystanders. In that moment, something clicked inside him. He truly realized, that on the day he interrupted his wedding to save Juliet, he had never needed to. The firefighters had already been standing beside her. They could have pulled her back easily. But he had still rushed forward. He had abandoned the woman who loved him, left her humiliated at their wedding, thrown both families into chaos, all to play a hero. Marcus broke down in tears. Winter snow began to fall, melting into the tracks on his face. Cold snow and warm sorrow mingled on his cheeks. From that day on, Marcus Davenport never spoke another word. He moved back into the villa we once shared alone. Year after year he sat in his study sketching. Over and over. Portraits from memory, my smile, my gaze, my grace. Every subtle expression, every shift of mood. He filled thousands of pages with drawings of me. He kept sketching until old age took him. When he died, according to his last wishes, his coffin was filled with every drawing he had made in the second half of his life. He couldn't be buried beside the woman he loved, so he chose to be buried with the version of me he had drawn with his own hands. Everyone in this story moved on to their own happily ever afters. Everyone except Marcus Davenport. He remained behind, trapped in the cold shadow of a past he could never escape. A past called Eleanor. And Marcus never walked out of it. I, Eleanor Whitmore, built a life with a man who loved me openly, unashamedly, completely. We raised children who knew their father's voice and felt his warmth every single day. I thought of Marcus sometimes in the quiet moments, not with regret but with the distant ache of memory. The boy who protected me in high school deserved better than the man he became. But I had grieved him and healed and moved forward. The last I heard of Marcus Davenport was a brief mention in an international business newsletter. Former Davenport heir passes away peacefully at home, surrounded by his art. I knew what that meant. I knew what filled those rooms. I wore white roses on my wedding day just as I had planned. But this time when I walked down the aisle, the man waiting at the end had tears in his eyes, tears of joy, not obligation. He took my hands and said my name like a prayer, not a possession. That is the difference between love and performance. Between being chosen and being convenient. Between a future built together and a past that holds you prisoner. Marcus Davenport loved me, I believe that now. But he loved his pride more. He loved his drama more. He loved the idea of being a hero more than he loved the woman who would have stood beside him through anything. And I learned that walking away is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for the person you leave behind. Because staying would have made us both miserable. Leaving gave us both a chance. He just couldn't take his. The end.